Hey guys, and welcome to season 3 of the Us People podcast. I'm your host, Savia Rocks, and in this season, I get to make my guests laugh, cry, and even make them think about life a little differently with the questions I fire over to them, which digs into their lives and professions a little differently. We even had a chance to change up the intro, giving you a fresh, new sound. I look forward to sharing season 3 of the Us People podcast with you. Let's go.
Hello, I'm Karlia Lykourgou, a barrister at Doughty Street and the founder of Ivy Normanton Legal Outfitters. You're listening to Us People podcast with Savia Rocks.
Made up my mind, now's my time to shine. Now's my time to shine. Time that you let go, time that you let go, now's my time to shine.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Us People podcast. I'm your host, Savia Rocks, and today I'm humbled to have Karlia here with me, who is a barrister. I'm so excited to actually speak to you, Karlia. The reason being is I've only ever had one other barrister on the show, but I've never actually managed to ask the questions that I want to ask a barrister because I've learned so much and I've done so much more research from my first interview compared to the interview we're about to do now. So my first thing to say to you, Karlia, is thank you so much for coming on the Us People podcast and being a guest. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be speaking to you.
Perfect. So my first question to you, Karlia, is could you tell me a little bit about yourself, of where you grew up, your background, but also how that influenced you to be the person who you are today?
Oh, that's a big question. So I'm from London, from North London. My family background is Greek Cypriot. My grandparents came over from Cyprus. My mum's side from the 60s. My dad's side sort of went back and forth. Dad was born over there. Mum was born here. I was born over here. So I've grown up with a culture in North London, and I went to secondary school here and always wanted to be a lawyer, I suppose. It sort of started quite early on with arguments on the 699. Whenever I got on the bus, it just seemed that there was always some sort of debate happening, whether it was, I remember quite a fierce one over Ninja Turtles versus Power Rangers. That was the real, like, and where chickens come from. But there was like really fierce debates, and it was before we all had proper internet on our phones, so you'd spend a long time on this stuff. And I always had a very keen sense of justice and wanted to do something that had a social purpose. So it felt like lawyers, if the law governs everything, and the people who know the law always seem to me the best people who are able to change it and to challenge it and to stand up for other people who didn't know it so well. And so it always felt very important to me that this was a route that I wanted to go down. I didn't always know that I wanted to be a barrister. It took a lot of years of building up my confidence to get to the point where I felt able to go for it, because it's a very competitive industry.
Yeah.
And yeah, it took a while. And I think at school, I was sort of the one who was, I wasn't necessarily like that girl who was kind of flirting with guys and whatever. There was certainly some of that on MSN, obviously. But I was more like the one sort of arguing in class and being told to sort of pipe down. And so it took a while to build up that confidence to go for it. But over time, I did. And, went to university and took every opportunity I could to study abroad and to go see the world and do as much as I could. I got into NGOs and charity work, death penalty stuff, and eventually made my way over to the bar. Very concise.
I like
Pressing
it
of how I got there. But yeah, that's a rough overview.
That's amazing. It must have been quite a journey for you, because that's something I do want to talk about, is your journey there. But also, before I even ask you that, is a question that is a reflection question that I love asking every single guest that comes on the show is, who do you see when you look in the mirror? It's very important. Who do you see when you look in the mirror? But also, what does your reflection, Karlia, say back to you as a person? But on the flip side of that question also, has there ever been a moment in your life where you have looked in a mirror but did not recognize the person staring back at you?
She's got more wrinkles than she used to have.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, she's got more wrinkles. But no, I recognize her and I like her. And it's always been quite important to me that that I liked the person that I could look at in the mirror. And I think that goes sort of hand in hand with ideas of integrity for me. Being able to look at yourself in the mirror and think, I like the person who I see in that. She's and when I think about, what course to take, sometimes I think about, am I going to still like that person in the mirror if I do this or that?
Yeah,
but true. There's also a sense of forgiveness as well, because we're not perfect, and there will be times where you don't take the right course, and I think sometimes it's about being kind to that person in the mirror, and not carrying things too much, or not being too harsh on that person in the mirror because, she's not looking her best that day, or, giving her props when she is looking her best some days.
Yeah, it's true.
You're like, bloody hell, you've done a good job today. Another day is not so much. But it's about, I think, the way I interpret that question is sort of sometimes seeing yourself separately from I and myself, is sort of looking at yourself to some extent a little bit objectively, and how do you feel about that? And I try and be kind to myself as though I were another person. And I think that's what I think about it.
I like it. I like your breakdown of it. It makes sense to me. Talk to me about your inspirations, because that's also very important, especially when you are a barrister. Was there anybody who inspired you while you were in education for being a barrister? I believe that teachers do play an important part in our lives, and they sometimes make or break us by the things that they say. Has there been anybody in your life, it could be families or teachers or uni, who have inspired you?
There's a lot of, I've been thinking quite a bit about inspiration lately. Someone asked me what advice I would give to someone sort of starting out. And I think one of the key pieces of advice I would give is find someone or something or some words that you can lean on when circumstances are starting to make you stoop, and from and something that you can aspire to as well, that keeps you going. And I think that's part of resilience, and I think it's part of ambition. It's a thing that propels you but also keeps you going when you're starting to lose some momentum, and those influences will change over time. But when I was much younger, I was very inspired by like human rights lawyers like Asma Jahangir and Michael Mansfield, who worked on miscarriage of justice cases, and who wanted to make things right, who wanted to defend people who couldn't defend themselves, who stood up to authority or authoritarian regimes, who were interested in underdogs and righting wrongs. And that was always deeply inspirational to me, and that's the kind of work I wanted to go into. And I remember reading Sister Helen Pregen's The Death of Innocence, which got me very interested in death penalty cases and miscarriages of justice as well. And when I went to university, and I studied law, A lot of the law, not everything in law is terribly interesting or will interest you, every aspect of it. But the things that kept me going were the practical aspects, getting to work on things like the Innocence Project and working on a real case where we were worried about the safety of that conviction. And then going to America and working on death penalty cases there and all that kind of thing. And at each stage, you find someone who is in this field or who's sort of inspiring you because of the work that they're doing. And so there's been various sort of people as I've gone along who have inspired me at that stage. Having gone on to sort of a more entrepreneurial part of my life, one of the people whose story inspired me was Joy Mangano, who was the inventor of the Miracle Mop, and she was sort of a mother of three with, I don't think, any real business experience previously, but she invented a mop that was better than anything that existed at the time. And she took it to shops and nobody wanted it. And somehow she managed to get it on TV. And then she started a whole empire of basically inventing things to make people's lives easier, because she knew what the problems were and then wanted to make them easier. And that really inspired me, because as a barrister who has started a company called Ivy Normanton, which is specializing in courtwear for women, I wanted to address this sort of gap in the market where female barristers were considered very much an afterthought in terms of courtwear, and wanted to do something about it. But I'd spent all my life training to be a lawyer, not a business person. So her story, Joy Mangano's story, I found very inspiring, because I thought, well, if she can do it, then maybe I can do it. And so that's the answer to that question.
No, I love it. So how is it? Another question that will actually follow up with what we've just been speaking about is, could you walk me through a day in your life?
Oh, God.
This is gonna be interesting. From the moment you wake up in the morning to when you get creative within your field, because people seem to think creativity is just a musician, an artist. No, we all have creativity within us when we're doing our work, but it's how we implement it into what we're doing that counts. Could you walk me through a day in your life and how it actually is?
Well, it varies, you see. So at the moment, so I'm a criminal barrister at Doughty Street. So I have primarily a crime practice. I also do some professional discipline and other public law and other areas. So when I'm doing pure crime work, I get up and I'm totally focused on my case, going to court and thinking about my case and thinking about the work I've got to do for my clients. At the moment, I'm on secondment at Kingsley Napley solicitors. So I'm presenting cases on behalf of the Health and Care Professions Council. So I'm working from home at the moment. So I'm not in court as much as I was before. I mean, what is a typical day during the course of this sort of pandemic? Nothing's typical anymore. But also, having founded Ivy Normanton, we're in the first year of this company running. There are sort of peaks and flows as we sort of launch new things like the court hijab.
Yes.
So at the moment, a typical day is I get up around sort of 6:30, and for the beginning part of the day, I sort of argue with my partner over who's going to make coffee, and then we'll sort of split the job somehow, and then I'll spend the first sort of part of the day, maybe the first couple of hours, doing admin for crime work or for Ivy and Normanton. And then I'll jump on and do Kingsley Napley work for about 7 hours.
Wow.
And then after that, I'll do Ivy Normanton work for another sort of few hours.
Oh my gosh.
and whatever's involved there. And then it depends, because with the sort of jobs that I'm doing, if I've got a hearing, then I'll have to sort of shift everything around the hearing. If I've got huge order, then I've got to sort of shift everything around the huge order. But roughly, there are 3 things that I'm normally doing every day, and that's sort of my hours, my bar work, my crime work, and then the business.
When do you get time for yourself?
Not very often.
Wow. I just wanted to throw that. It's wow.
I squeeze it in here and there. It's often when I feel I have the least time. I can't remember where I read it, somewhere, and it was, I can't remember if it was a Dalai Lama, and someone said, I think he said, like, I meditate 3 times a day, except for when I'm really busy, and then I meditate, 6 times a day. And I think sometimes you have to force yourself to take some time, otherwise you never will. And often there will reach a point where I just get very tired, and then I will just listen to my body and do nothing, notwithstanding the fact, there are always a few more emails or something like that I could be sending. I just have to stop, and then I will sort of force myself to go take some time. And I think I've gotten better at that the older I've gotten, because I think the older you get, the better you are at giving yourself permission to do things, because to some extent I think you build on your successes, and you say, well, I managed to get so far having done this.
Yeah.
So, I think I'll be able to carry on a little bit more, even if I take a break now.
It's so crazy, because I know that your day is full packed all the time. And for you to be able to just meditate, someone taught me that you can meditate anywhere. And I had to understand what meditation is and how it works, especially when you're doing your work. It could be you're interviewing people every day. It could be you being a barrister. But what you said is absolutely really true, where you can meditate anywhere, and meditation is actually good for the soul.
I use the meditation more as an analogy for taking time for yourself.
Yeah.
I'm not terribly, I have done meditation in the past, but I'm not terribly good at keeping my mind totally clear. And I think that is being very present is what I find very difficult. But I find walking is my meditation in a way. It's a means of sort of, and providing some sort of creative space as well. It's normally when I'm moving, because as often I'm sort of sat down and I need to get up and move. I can't always just be sat in one place.
You seem like a very focused person. When you're if you have a trial or you're working, you seem very focused. You seem like, this is what I'm doing. So for you to come away from that, do you feel like you're not betraying what you're doing? You're just, how can I say it in a way that makes sense? You feel like you're not giving it your all if you feel like you're taking time for yourself. That makes sense.
I see that. I wouldn't always describe myself as terribly focused, because I think some of the best times are when I'm in a state of flow, when I'm totally involved in something, totally engaged, and I can find it really hard to get into states of flow, because I can get quite easily distracted. And I think that is a condition of a modern age, when we're sort of used to hearing our phones and everything pinging off all the time. So sometimes I just have to sort of sit and force myself to do several tasks. And if I can't, then I'll try and intersperse them and just try and chip away at them. This idea of chipping away at things is quite important to me, because often I find it quite intimidating to sit and do one whole task. So I think to myself, well, if I can just chip away at several, then over time they will all be done. But yeah, I think that is probably the sort of the way that I go about things.
It sounds good to me. You have a structure. So what is the most powerful aspects of being a barrister? Where do you find your power when it comes to being a barrister?
I think I find it, this idea of responsibility, I think, is important to me. I think when it's my client, I am, I appreciate that it's an honor to be in a position to represent this person. It's taken me a long time to get to this position, and I take it seriously. It's this person's life that I am, not that I'm responsible for, but it's a key event in this person's life. Whether or not you go to prison can affect several other factors in your life.
Yes.
or what order is imposed, or the impact of a conviction, or it has an enormous impact on someone's life. It's a responsibility I take seriously. And so being in that position sort of gives me focus. I think that's the power of it. But also this idea of integrity as well. At the bar, your integrity is very important, because as a member of, as an advocate, you are an officer of the court. Your word carries a lot of sway, and if you are found to be dishonest or to jeopardize that in any way, the implications are enormous. And so, defending someone to the best of my ability, maintaining my integrity, these are key things that are important to me as a barrister. But also a sense of justice and fairness as well. I try and maintain that. That's part of the reason that I started Ivy Normanton, because I felt that there was an imbalance in the way that women at the bar were being dressed. And it seems a small thing, doesn't it? Clothing in the grand scheme of things. But when we are all doing the same job, all working exceedingly hard, when I started the company and I felt that there wasn't the same offering for women at the bar in terms of our legal dress.
Yeah.
It seemed unfair to me that when we do such an important job and we are equal to our male peers, that this was a representation that we had not achieved proper equality, notwithstanding the fact we've been at the bar for over 100 years. And then Ivy Normanton has also been another vehicle for me to try and address the issue of inclusion at the bar, because the bar has a reputation for being a very white, very male, upper and middle class environment. And I wanted, Ivy Normanton was a sort of vehicle for me to try and address that imbalance by providing images of more diverse images of what a woman-in-law looks like, and trying to promote that. So, for example, the Ivy Normanton hijab that I created with my friend Mariam Mir at Doughty Street, that came about because as a hijab-wearing barrister, she couldn't find the right sort of hijab to wear in court.
Yeah.
And that just seemed nuts to me. So we worked together to make this hijab, and it's had an enormous response, because a lot of people who are looking at the bar and looking at the law, who come from Muslim backgrounds, especially hijab-wearing women, I think it really speaks to them, because it makes them feel like there is a place at the bar for them. And so, in addressing imbalances is important to me as a person, as a barrister, as a businesswoman, maintaining integrity and trying to do a good job to the best of my ability in whatever I'm doing. Trying to maintain high standards, I suppose.
How do you feel that women are now being treated within law? Because like you said, it's predominantly male. It was predominantly male. I know things are evolving slowly, But how do you feel women are being treated now compared to, say, 100 years ago? Do you feel like we are evolving to become better, or do you feel like there are still things that need to be done in order for a woman like yourself, who is a superb barrister in what you do? How do you feel that we can help each other so that when the next generation of barristers come in, they can also evolve to help open doors so that the next generation of barristers coming in have it a little bit easier?
So I think your initial question was, what's the situation for women at the moment?
Yeah.
How's it going on, and how can we improve it for those coming up? I mean, when Ivy Williams and Helena Normanton, who were the first two women to become members of the bar, joined, they had an incredibly difficult time being instructed by anyone, because there was still a perception that women were not equal to the same level of work that men were. And that was sort of where we started. And they had to fight legal battles just to get to this position, to be lawyers, to be barristers. And we have moved on from there now, so that women are instructed in very high profile cases and are doing a higher level of work. But there are still some structural inequalities in the way that the law operates that makes it very difficult for women at the bar to stay there, and to succeed and to reach those higher echelons. And I think one of the big problems with retention is the difficulties that are experienced by people with families, because there is still an expectation that women will maintain the heaviest burden in terms of raising children. And it can be very, very difficult for women to recover their careers once they take a career break. Because the way it works at the independent bar, at least, is that you build up you pledge your apprenticeship, so 6 months sort of following someone, and then 6 months on your feet, and then you're qualified, and then your chambers will normally decide if they're going to take you on as a tenant or not, sort of full-time member of chambers, not just an apprentice. So some chambers are 12 months, some are 18. So once you get past that stage, you're on your feet representing clients, you're building relationships with solicitors. And then if you have a good relationship with solicitors, then they will continue instructing you. And the idea is that they will sort of start instructing you on more serious stuff as you build up your experience.
Okay.
And your career gets a sort of momentum going where you have regular solicitors, you have regular clients. Yeah. And then if you take a career break, the fear there is always that your solicitors will forget you and go and get someone else. True. Who they instruct regularly. And then you will have to build all that up again. And there is a real, what's the word? If advocacy is something that if you're not doing it constantly, you do start to, it sort of starts to dribble out of your ears and you start to forget it a bit. And because of there's so many changes in the law and the way things operate, even if you take a short break, the fear is that you'll struggle to get back into it. So there is, I think, an enormous anxiety and concern that when women take a big career break, how they're going to get back into it. But then even once you get past that, the difficulty is, so you do have children, especially at certain areas like the criminal bar where things are very last minute.
Yes.
Cases come in last minute, how you can organize something like childcare. So it's not unusual at 5 o'clock to be told that you're going to Newcastle the next day, or that your trial has come in, told on Tuesday evening that your trial has come in and you've got to prep a trial overnight. And if your child is sick or something like that, it's extremely difficult for you to manage. So those are some of the big problems that the bar has, and they affect women a lot. And one of the one of the recent issues that have come up is extended court hours, whereby the courts, in order to clear the backlog, the Department of Ministry of Justice is suggesting, or has done for the Magistrates Court, and they've trialled it for the Crown Court, extended court hours, starting earlier and finishing later. And if you imagine that, if you're finishing court very late, and then you've got to get home, and then you've got to prepare for the next day.
Exactly.
It makes it extremely difficult. And then if you throw children into that, it's even harder. So these are all issues that make it very difficult, I think, for women. And I mean, I've given talks. I've given talks at schools, and I've been asked, what do you think? What would you tell women going into the legal profession? And I would say you need to think carefully. What is it you want in your life? And you need to have some sort of rough plan, because if you want to work in legal aid and just do human rights cases, working in legal aid, and you want to live in London, and you want to own your house, and you want to have a partner who's, running a startup, all these kinds of things, and you want children, not all of those things are going to be compatible with a long-term career at the bar. True. It's going to be very difficult to do all of those things. And it may be that you need to think quite carefully about what you want and how you can actually make it happen. Yeah. And I think women have to think about these things far more than men do.
Sometimes I still don't think it's fair that we have that burden on us, whereas men get to kind of be free and do whatever they desire to do. Another question that I had for you, which is can be quite controversial, and I know there is only so much that you can tell me about cases that you do. But one question that I did want to ask you is, how do you defend somebody if you know they are guilty?
Well, firstly, I don't ever know for sure because I wasn't there.
Yeah, true.
If they are guilty. The way that the justice system is established is that there are, in the Magistrates Court, so there are two different types of courts. Talking about the criminal justice system, there are the lower courts, the Magistrates Courts, and there are the Crown Courts, who that's where you have the judge and then you have the jury in the Crown Court. In the Magistrates Court, you'll either have a bench of 2 or 3 magistrates or a district judge. If we're talking about, say, some of the more serious cases, let's say, it's going to be the jury who ultimately decides whether this person has done this thing or not. And in the less serious cases, it'll be the magistrates or the judge who ultimately decides. And they make that decision after having heard evidence from the prosecution and from the defense. So they've heard 2 sides of evidence. And then there is a standard of proof that the prosecution who bring the case have to prove the standard too. And they have to make those, they have to make the bench or the jury sure of their case in order, and they have to prove certain elements of the offence that they are seeking against this defendant. And the starting point is always that the defendant is innocent until proven guilty. And to me, that's always seemed like a good system because it involves several elements. It involves a starting point. The defendant is innocent until they are proven otherwise. It involves the allegation and the elements that need to be proven. It involves 2 parties arguing 2 different sides and providing sometimes different evidence and different ways of looking at the evidence, testing it. And then it involves the application of law, and then it involves a separate party who's not spent a lot of time looking at one side of the case to evaluate that and then reach a decision as to whether they have been persuaded to the requisite standard that someone has committed the offence or not.
Yeah.
Now, when someone asks you, how can you defend someone whose case you don't believe? I think about it this way. If it were you or someone you care about, how would you feel if someone determined that they were not going to try particularly hard to represent your client, to represent you or someone you care about, because they weren't persuaded by you or your relative's account? The way that the system operates is that there are several checks and balances there, so that this person has as fair an opportunity to have their case heard as much as the other side does. And I think that is the fairest way of doing it, because if you were simply dismissive of the other person's account, then you could get it totally wrong. I mean, yesterday there were a number of postal workers whose convictions were overturned because they were accused of fraud, having been accused of taking money from the post offices that they were running. It then emerged that there was an enormous glitch in the post office system, which meant that they were not stealing money. It was a glitch in the system, and that they were wrongly accused. Now, if their barristers had simply said, well, just looks like a simple case of fraud there, I'm not going to try very hard, or I'm not going to have this, I'm not going to do this case, then these people would have gone undefended.
Yeah, it's true.
That's why I think it is necessary to some extent to simply put the system, I think, is effective. But when I have a client whose evidence, if my view of their case is that the evidence against them is very strong, then obviously I'll advise them of this, because it has an impact on the sentence that they may receive, because you get credit for pleading guilty at the earliest opportunity. And so I'll say to them, this is what you're accused of. This is what needs to be proven. This is the evidence in the case. This is my view. This is what the sentence is likely to be. And this is the discount you'll get for pleading at various different stages. What do you want to do? And then they make a decision. And whatever their decision is, if they want to go for sentence, then I'll mitigate to get them the best sentence they possibly can, putting forward their side, knowing the prosecution will put forward their side as well. And if they want to go for trial, then we will put forward the best case we possibly can. And then ultimately it will be the court that decides.
How do you emotionally disconnect yourself from a case? Because some cases, I'm sure you have done, can be really emotional. And sometimes you feel like your emotions are connected to the case, which can be complicated. How do you detach yourself from your emotions to make sure you're doing the best that you can for the case?
Some cases are more emotional than others. And the funny thing, my partner's in a criminal barrister as well, and he had a recent murder case, and the facts of that one were very sad. And even though it's his case, it sort of affected the whole household, because just the sort of futility and silliness of the whole situation. It's a sort of stabbing that was so unnecessary. It sort of affects the whole house. And I think it was something that was a lot more difficult when I was younger. But I was also involved in more death penalty cases where the stakes were very high as well.
Wow.
And I think you have to try and guard against vicarious trauma as a lawyer when you're dealing with very difficult cases, and you're dealing with difficult facts, and reading about horrible things. I remember I was doing sort of an internship in Cambodia dealing with Khmer Rouge, the Khmer Rouge cases, and that involved sort of torture and accounts of crimes against humanity. And those cases are difficult to walk away from. And I think that you have to try and simply accept that it is awful, but also make some time to for yourself to have enjoyable things and to be with people who you love, and to try and not simply immerse yourself in the negative.
Yes.
And I'm also quite a proactive person, so I think to myself, are there any lessons that we can learn from this? Is there anything positive that we can do to try and learn some positive lessons, or to bring something good out of this? And sometimes that can be, education. Can we educate young people about knives? Can we educate people about joint enterprise? Can we try and do something that turns this negative into a positive, or at least enables us to continue surviving? Because it's not callous to say, to try and move on from something that is really devastating. Because if you simply allow it to drag you down, you won't be able to do anything else. You won't be able to help anyone else. So you have to keep surviving. And I think we'll all find our different ways of surviving. Sometimes that will be some person's meditation or yoga. That'll be another person. True. More specifically me, it's ice cream and,
That's me too.
Ice cream and kebab in front of, some sort of comedy, or, that's me.
Oh man, if there was one question that you wished people would ask you more that they've never asked you, or they feel reluctant to ask you, what would that question be and why?
Oh, do you know what? I don't know how to answer that. What do I wish people would ask me? I don't think about that very often. I don't really think about, because more often than not, I'm volunteering information. Yeah. This is what I think.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. That's why I wanted to ask you the question. I know because of what you do, you withheld so much information. And there's also another question which can kind of connect to that, because you're dealing with so many different cases. It could be murder, whatever it might be. Do you guys get help with talking out to somebody else? Could be a therapist, it could be just somebody to listen to you, because you are also dealing with so much yourselves, knowing that you have all this information and that you cannot speak to necessarily other people about it. Do you guys get help?
So there is an effort, I think, to improve well-being at the bar, and I think there's starting to be more there's some more effort to try and get people talking about when they're struggling, but there is no formal assistance for people in dealing with difficult cases, to assist them in processing that or dealing with that. And I think it's something that you see in a lot of different professions, actually, be it the police or the army, or those involved in law. There's an expectation, I think, that you will just be able to handle it, and if you can't handle it, then you need to, can't handle the fire, then just get out. But I don't think that's always helpful. I think that it is better to sort of admit and talk about these things sometimes when you're struggling. And I think that there's a real sort of collegiate atmosphere amongst different industries that do deal with difficult facts, to try and support each other. And I think, it's in the medical profession as well. It's in all sorts of different professions where you deal with difficult facts. And but there is definitely a tension between someone who deals with difficult facts and circumstances, and an expectation that you should just be able to handle it if you're in that profession, and then also the realities of actually dealing with those cases. And I think in those circumstances, it is helpful if there are other colleagues who you can say, this was just awful, and I'm struggling with this a little bit today. And sometimes if we can have candid conversations, I think that's the best thing, because if you think that everyone else is coping and you're the only one who's not, then it makes you think that somehow you're lesser than the other people. But more often than not, we're all struggling. We've all got our struggles. And it is easier if we can all say, yeah, I had that once and it was horrible, and this is how I dealt with it. Or, giving people permission to struggle and to admit their struggle can be helpful. And then I think it helps us try and deal with things in more healthy ways, rather than just going home and seeking solace in bottles of wine.
Yes.
To try and find more healthy ways of dealing with these things. I think that's the best way of sort of processing it, but it's not easy. It's not easy. I think especially at the beginning, when you are trying to establish yourself and you are questioning yourself more than when you are a bit more established.
I like that. Thank you for sharing that, because that, to me, it's very, very important for people to understand that although we are all in different professions, we all do get stuck sometimes, or feel like we're carrying a burden on, and we'll feel like we're the only ones with this burden, which sometimes we feel because we're humans at the end of the day. So
absolutely.
What are you most proud of that you stand for as an individual, and how do you share that within your passion, within your work?
What am I most proud of for what I stand for as an individual? I don't know that I necessarily, I don't say to myself, I'm Karlia and I stand for this.
Yeah.
I have on my desk a little framed picture, a post-it note, and it says, I'm very proud of myself and what I'm doing. And I wrote it down once after, I can't remember after what had happened, but it was in a moment where I felt proud of myself. And I keep it on my desk sometimes as a reminder that I am proud of myself and what I'm doing, because it took a long time to get here. I envisioned being a barrister. I envisioned being a barrister at Doughty Street, and I struggled to get here. It didn't happen overnight. I wasn't someone who, I have had help, from my family. I've had the benefit of some financial help, but, I never went to all private schools. I didn't come from, highly connected people in the legal industry or anything like that. My dad, my mum and dad and their families came over with nothing, and they, they did the best they could. And then I wanted to be a barrister, and it took me 4 years, 4 attempts to get pupillage. And that was 4 years, and there was a lot of rejection. And it was at the point where I thought I never was going to get it, that I did. And then those sort of early years were very hard. And then I ended up applying to my dream set, and then I got in, and then I envisioned this business, and I set it up, and it has been hard. It's been hard. I'm not going to pretend that it happened overnight. I won't pretend that I waltzed through it. There have been tears. There has been moments of doubt and struggle, but I've carried on. And so every success is built on that. That I'm proud of.
Don't you find that's a better story though? Even hearing it now, and now that you're about to share that with thousands of people who are going to listen to this and be like, wow, that's amazing. You can come from nothing. Because people seem to think that you have to be in this circle where you go to a certain university, where you have very wealthy parents. People do have that mindset. And I've spoken to a lot of people And they seem to think that if you're a lawyer, a solicitor, a barrister, anything of high stature, that you must be, you must have money, or you must have power, or you must know somebody who knows somebody. But hearing your story lets people know that you can come from absolutely nothing and still get to where you want to and be proud of yourself. Because, guys, you can't see this, but I'm going to tell you, Karlia is actually looking on her desk. I can see her looking at her desk and she has the note on her desk, okay? So I'm letting you know the note is real because it's right there. But it's nice to see your emotions when you're talking about it, because obviously people can't see your emotions, whereas I can. And I love being able to express that through my voice to let the listeners know exactly that you are passionate about what you do. So thank you for sharing that.
What I'd like to say is, I like to be quite upfront about sort of what help I've had, because I think it is disingenuous for people to simply say you just need to work hard and envision and you will get there, because I had the benefit of some financial help from my parents, and so that helped me, because it meant that there were times when I could do unpaid internships and things like that, but not everything was paid. I still had to work really hard. No one wrote the applications for me or got, did it for me. I worked hard. But what I will say is this: we do not. I think if you look at sort of where you want to be as a race, we don't all start at the same place. We don't all start from the beginning. Some of us will be further ahead than others, but it is still a race worth running. And I think what is very helpful to consider is to think, where is it I want to be? What do I need to get there? What do I already have? What do I need? And how can I get those things? And sometimes it's thinking outside of the box, because I, for example, wasn't very well connected in the legal industry. And I needed legal experience. So, like, one of the things I did was I sort of joined this legal society which accepted anyone, and they had a Christmas party at Garden Court Chambers, which was a Chambers I really admired, and I went there to go meet people, and I went and I met people, and I got talking to barristers, and I ended up sort of managing to swing coffee with one of those barristers, and then I ended up getting a job, and then I sort of made more of it, and then I went somewhere. After bar school, I could have just got a paralegal job, but I didn't just get a paralegal job. I found this organization that I really admired called Reprieve, and I went and I volunteered there like a few days a week. And then I worked in a pub the other days of the week so that I could volunteer at the places I wanted to be. And then a job came up, and then I went for the job, which, and then at one point I was doing like 3 jobs because I was just trying to get as much experience as possible, and I was making it all work. But one thing built upon the other, and I was identifying. I was like, right, so I didn't get this application this year. What was missing? What do I still need? And then I went and looked for it. If I needed more advocacy experience, I went and did an advocacy course, or I went and tried to get more went to the free representation unit and did some cases. It's not enough to simply say, I just don't have the connections, I just don't have this or that. What could you be doing to improve your situation? And for some people it's less, and for some people it's more that you need to do. And it is unfortunate that it is that way, and I wish that it was more equal. But it is not impossible. It just requires some thought and some strategy, and you can achieve what you want, even if it's not given to you on a plate. It is achievable. Yeah. You can do it.
I love that. Do you feel that you are in your happiest place right now, or do you feel let me rephrase it in a better way. What is stopping you from complete happiness?
A lack of time, I think. because there are things that I enjoy doing. I'd like more time for myself, and I don't have very much time for myself. I think if I had some more of that, that would be nice.
We'll get you some more of that, okay?
Yeah, if I didn't need to sleep, that would be great. I think sleep is a waste of time, but I need it.
Do you? And you know what? I used to think that too, but then my body started telling me I needed it.
Yeah, yeah,
And then I started feeling bad for sleeping. I don't know if you've ever felt like that before.
yeah. I don't feel bad for sleeping. I just wish I didn't need to, because then,
Yeah.
you know, there's some sort of, I'm sure there's a novel or something lodged somewhere inside me. I get that novel bashed out. I'd watched all the main films I wanted to watch. I'd be like,
Oh,
doing
dear.
all this other stuff, but I need sleep, so it's not going to happen.
Fair enough. That's fair enough too. What is your earliest experience of realizing that language had power?
Oh, that's interesting. What's my most earliest experience of realizing language had power? I don't know. What I can say is I speak Greek and speak English, and having the facility to express yourself in more than one language has always been useful, because there are certain words that don't translate into English.
That's true.
And it gives you more of a palette to paint with. And also it enabled my mum to shout at me in front of people in another language whilst being very polite to, non-Greek speakers. So I think contribution from Andrula would be, that is why that's the power of language.
I love that. Well, my mum does that to me in French, so I totally understand where you're coming from. Yeah, it's really, really true. When was the last time you felt totally at peace with yourself?
Oh, that's interesting. Time I felt totally at peace with myself. I don't know. There are only ever sort of moments, I think, where I don't know if I understand the question, to be honest, because there are moments where I feel peaceful. There are moments where I am pleased with my day's work and I feel I've earned the rest that I'm having, and I'm enjoying the rest, and I feel I'm using it in the most productive way possible. And that is a peaceful, satisfied moment. But I don't know if that's different to being at peace with yourself. I think being at peace with yourself has something to do with being content with where you are at and what you are doing. And I think for the most part I am. But I think if you are someone who has sort of quite a lot of ambition, to some extent you're never totally at peace, because you're constantly sort of thinking forward and where your net's going to be.
That's true.
But then all of this as well is wrapped up in the situation that we find ourselves with COVID, because this isn't our normal reality. This is unique circumstances that we are surviving, and I think there is also a tension there, because you're not doing what you would have been doing maybe, but then you're also getting other negatives, but then also other benefits of having a quieter world, and it's learning to be comfortable with that. So I can't give you a time. I can tell you that there are peaceful moments when I'm pleased and satisfied, but I'm broadly at peace. I think I'm at peace with myself, where I am and who I am.
Yeah.
Certainly much more than I was when I was younger. But I would say, because there are things that I still want to achieve, it's like having a piece of grit in your shoe that you're still sort of, slightly restless but I
It's a
know
good analogy,
who I
actually.
am and what I'm doing, and I'm comfortable with that. And that's one of the nice things about, you know, being in your 30s.
Yeah, me too, actually. Yeah, it is quite cool. I
Yeah.
think we're at when you're in your 30s. I feel that you're in a good place because you're not too young to do anything, and you're definitely not too old to do anything. You're in that age where the world is. I think the world is your oyster, regardless, and everybody has a different time of getting there or becoming.
Yeah.
Somebody said to me when I asked them the question I just asked you, they said it's not a destination, it's a journey. And that's a
Yeah.
good analogy of it also. I said, you know what, I'm going to take that with me because that's a good way of looking at life and looking at things in your own way.
I think so. I think that your 20s are very difficult, actually. I found my 20s was a period where I was having to sort of like come good on all this promise,
Yeah.
you know, and I felt pressure to, you know, come good on all of my aspirations and all the sort of education and all the, you know, foundational stuff. But also I was still totally finding my way. I think by the time you sort of start getting into your 30s, you start having a body of experience and survival to build on. Because I find it very powerful, this idea that I survived that, so I can survive this. When you're in 20s, God, you still don't know your ass from your elbow, and you
Yes, true.
and you're still figuring it out, and you don't know if you're going to survive it because you haven't survived anything yet. So you just got to hold on to the sides of this boat that's like rocking.
I'm breaking and you know, oh shit. Yeah, I've been there loads of times.
Oh my God.
Oh my days. So I've only got two more for you, and I've enjoyed this thoroughly. My second to last question for you is: it's a long time coming for this, actually. So, what would you like your legacy to be?
Sammy, you always ask these very sort of interesting questions.
It's I have a very, very open-minded, authentic being about life, and I wish that more people had that open-mindedness about life and people, because without that, how can you evolve? How can you teach other people, or how can you become your best? And I just think that it's very important to ask questions. If you don't ask questions, how will you learn? It's like you do. You ask. Listen, if I was to ask you to ask me 10 questions, I'm sure I would be stuck on the spot when it came to law.
Yeah, I think you ask very good questions though, and I'm pleased you are. Do you know, I walk near where I live. I've discovered this cemetery. It's a very old cemetery. Some people find them quite morbid, but I actually quite find them sort of
them.
I like them.
Yeah.
I find them a place of reflection. And it's a very old one. And I think when you're sort of looking back at this a sort of a physical relic of someone's life, it doesn't always amount to much. And sometimes they're so old and they're half buried, and sometimes they're quite new. But ultimately, it's not much, is it? A sort of thing in the ground that hardly anyone would notice if they weren't walking past this morbid place that not everyone likes. But it does show how transient everything is, and how at the end of the day, there's not a huge amount necessarily that's left. Have you ever looked at sort of these sort of planetary photos, space photos?
Oh yeah.
We are. I quite like astronomy. We are a tiny speck floating through an infinite universe.
Yep.
You and your problems are a mere blink in time. We don't ultimately matter at all. And so I think the thing that I would like, if I were hit by a bus tomorrow, that's the way I prefer to think about it, rather than my legacy. I want everyone who I love to know fully that I love them, and I'll tell them to their face and in messages, and I want them to know, never to be any doubt, that I love them and that I think highly of them and that I care about them. And anyone who I have any issues with, I want that to be cleared and to be addressed and made clear, and I want that gone. And every opportunity that comes my way that I can reasonably take and make the most of, I want to make the most of it. And I want to be as self-actualized as possible, the best version of myself that I can be. And if I could do those things, I think I would feel at peace with what I'd left behind and the life that I'd lived up to that point. And I think that's the best legacy, like if I can use such a grand word, that I could give or leave behind.
That's good enough for me. I think that's good enough for everyone else too. The main thing is if it's good enough for you, then it should be good enough for everyone else, because it's yours. You own it. You have it. It's yours. So my final question for you is, where can we find... I've had the pleasure of interviewing you today, and I've enjoyed it thoroughly. For you just being yourself, you saying how things are, you've been honest, and that's transcend through you to me, energy-wise, and that's so important for me. Energy is such a big thing to me. If anybody else would like to know more about you as a person, where can they find you?
I suppose I'm on LinkedIn, and I don't have a huge social media presence. I suppose that's sort of the best way of people being out there and being connected. I'm on Twitter, but I don't tweet very often. I don't put too much. I try not to put too much of myself out on social media. But if you're in trouble and you need a lawyer, you can go to Doughty Street website and get hold of me through my clerks. If you are a troubled young person who, wants some advice while I'm driving to the shops, I'm happy to have a chat with you. Just reach out over LinkedIn. If you are a legal professional who requires some legal wear, some legal attire, then go to Ivy Normanton. And if you have a query, you can go to info@ivynormanton.com, and I'll probably be answering. And if you, are someone who wants some idle chat on Twitter, then you might find me there, but probably not.
I love that end part. I might be there, but I doubt it.
I don't. See how I feel.
Oh, dear. I want to thank you so much for coming on the Yes People podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
No, it definitely has, guys. Thank you so much for listening to the Yes People podcast. And please remember, you can subscribe to Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and any other platform that you prefer listening to. Please also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can also donate to the Yes People podcast by simply going to the Savvy Rocks website, or just typing in paypal.me/Us People podcast. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Stay happy, stay positive, and as always, please continue to be kind to one another.
Time to let it go. Now's my time. Now's my time. Time to let it go. Now's my time. Now's my time. Time to let it go. Now is the time for me to focus. Stop all that playing hocus pocus. Stop doing it yourself. You need a little help. This time I want to see you shining. I think you need.
Yeah, I'm horrified at the things that we didn't mention. The things that happen in your 30s. What roots, what falls off, what turns different colours.
What turns different colours?
Don't ask, Zoe. I'm not putting that online.
I know, hold on, is there something come missing? I'm going to start looking at everything. What's turning different colours?
Made up my mind, now is my time to shine. Now is my time to shine. Time that you let go, time that you let go. Now is my time to shine. Now is my time to shine. Now is my time to shine. Time that you let go, time that you let go. Now is my time to shine. Time just enjoy the ride. Open those eyes, see the light. Ignite that fire inside it. Let it breathe breath into life. Push all your fears to the side. Control your mind, it's all alright. Enjoy your life, the joy is mine. Commit to you, you got the tools. Everything you do, you make the rules. Sometimes you need